"Mom, you really should stop wearing that," she said, laughing as she poured herself another glass of wine. "It looks like something from a thrift store clearance bin." Her voice filled my quiet dining room like perfume, sweet, but cloying. She pointed at the necklace around my neck, the one with the dull gold locket and tiny sapphires worn pale with time. "This?" I asked softly, brushing my fingers over it. "Your father gave me this when we—" I know, she interrupted, rolling her eyes. "When you two were young and broke and in love." She said it like the words themselves embarrassed her. "Mom, seriously. You've got to stop clinging to the past. It's depressing." Her husband, sitting beside her, looked down at his plate. He never said much, especially when she was like this, sharp, dismissive, cruel in small polished ways. I smiled faintly, pretending not to notice how my chest tightened. "It's not about the past," I said gently. "It's about remembering what matters." She snorted. "Well, what matters now is not looking like a museum exhibit. I could take that old jewelry set off your hands, if you want. I know a guy downtown who buys vintage pieces. Probably won't fetch much, but at least it won't just sit there collecting dust." That word, fetch, stung worse than her tone. Like she was talking about a broken lamp, not something that carried my entire life story inside it. "You'd sell it?" I asked quietly. "Of course," she said brightly, swirling her wine. "You're not wearing it for fashion. It's just clutter. And with the market for gold right now," she trailed off, glancing toward her husband. "Well, it could help me pay off a few bills." There it was. The motive. Not love. Not care. Just money. I looked down at my plate, cutting a piece of roast I could barely taste. She didn't even notice my silence. She kept talking, about real estate, her next spa trip, the new car she deserved. When she left that night, she kissed me on the cheek, the way you pat an old pet. "I'll come by next week, Mom," she said, slipping on her coat. "We'll clean out that jewelry box. Trust me, you'll thank me later." The door clicked shut behind her. For a long moment, I stood in the hallway, listening to the echo of her heels fade down the porch steps. Then I walked to the mirror and stared at myself. The woman staring back was older, yes, lines around the eyes, silver in the hair, but not weak. Not finished. My fingers moved to the locket again. The hinge creaked as I opened it. Inside, behind the tiny photo of her father, was a small engraving. Faded, but still visible. "For Emmy forever, until the stars lose their shine." I smiled sadly. "He would have laughed at her," I whispered. "He always knew how people showed their true colors when money entered the room." The next day, I opened the old cedar jewelry box she'd been eyeing. Inside were decades of pieces, rings, brooches, bracelets. Each one connected to a memory: my wedding, the birth of my daughter, our 25th anniversary trip. But there was one piece that stood out, a heavy, unpolished gold bangle, etched with tiny, uneven lines like a map. It had never seemed valuable. Her father bought it years ago from an estate auction, joking that it probably belonged to a queen in another life. I turned it in my hand now, catching a flicker of something strange, faint symbols carved so small I'd never noticed before. Curiosity prickled at me. That night, after dinner, I brought the bracelet to my desk and pulled out the old magnifying glass my husband used for his coin collection. Under the light, the pattern came alive, tiny letters, foreign ones. Latin maybe. And right beneath the clasp, hidden from plain sight, was a signature. Not my husband's. Not the jeweler's. Something else entirely. Cartier, I read softly, barely breathing. The next morning, I took a bus downtown to an old jewelry shop I'd known for decades. The owner, Mr. Whitman, was hunched over his counter polishing a ring when I entered. His white hair glowed under the lamp. "Margaret," he greeted warmly. "Haven't seen you in ages. What brings you in?" "I found something," I said, setting the bracelet on the velvet cloth. "I thought maybe you could tell me what it's worth." He adjusted his glasses and picked it up carefully. The moment he turned it over, his eyes widened. "Where did you get this?" he asked, voice suddenly low. "My late husband," I replied, surprised by his tone. "Why?" He didn't answer immediately. He set the bracelet under a jeweler's lamp, examining the engraving, tracing the mark with a trembling finger. This isn't just jewelry, he whispered. This is history. He disappeared into the back room and returned minutes later with a dusty book, flipping through pages until he found a black and white photograph, an identical bracelet. It was part of the 1934 Cartier Lost Heirloom collection, he explained, excitement flickering in his eyes. Commissioned by a European noble family, stolen during the war, vanished for decades. It's been missing ever since. If this is authentic. He stopped, looking at me with something between awe and disbelief. It could be worth over $3 million. I laughed softly. You must be joking. He shook his head. I've seen fakes, Margaret. This isn't one of them. You need to have this appraised immediately. And for heaven's sake, don't tell anyone. On the ride home, my hands shook as I held the bracelet inside a folded handkerchief. Outside the window, the city passed in blurs of gray and gold. My reflection looked back at me, a quiet old woman with a secret burning brighter than the skyline. I thought of my daughter's face when she mocked me, her condescending smirk, her voice dripping with pity. And for the first time in years, I smiled, not from sadness, but from knowing something she didn't. I wasn't going to sell the bracelet. No, that would have been too easy. I was going to let her try. That night, I set the jewelry box back on the vanity, exactly where she'd expect to find it when she came snooping. I tucked the authentic bracelet into an old glasses case and hid it behind a loose floorboard in the hall closet. Then I placed a near-identical costume bracelet in its place inside the box. Fake gold. Fake value. Real lesson. I whispered to the mirror, you'll get your chance, dear. And you'll take it. And when you do, the world will see exactly who you are. Before I continue, if your own child called your memories junk and tried to sell your past for cash, would you confront them, or let the truth expose them in its own time? Tell me in the comments below. When she arrived the next Saturday, she didn't knock. She just breezed in like she owned the place, perfume first, entitlement second. Mom, she called, already heading down the hallway. I brought boxes. We're finally going to clear out that clutter. I was in the kitchen pouring tea. Morning, darling, I said gently, as if she hadn't just announced her invasion. She smiled, all white teeth and impatience. I know you hate this kind of thing, but I'm trying to help you. You don't need to hold on to all that old junk. Her voice had that same sugar and salt mix, the kind she used whenever she wanted to feel superior. Some things are memories, not junk, I replied quietly. She rolled her eyes and walked toward my bedroom. You keep saying that, but memories don't pay bills. I followed, slow but steady. She was already pulling out drawers by the time I reached the door. My vanity was open, its contents scattered across the bed, pearls, brooches, a few old watches, and the jewelry box that held the fake bracelet. She lifted the lid like a thief who already knew where to look. See, she said, holding up the bangle between two fingers. No one wears this kind of stuff anymore. It's heavy, outdated, and doesn't match anything. I watched her closely. She didn't even realize she was holding the wrong one. I guess you're right, I said softly, folding my arms. Maybe it's time I let it go. Her eyes flicked to mine, greedy and triumphant. Really? I nodded. If you think you can get something for it, go ahead. She smiled so wide it almost broke my heart. Don't worry, Mom, she said, patting my hand as if she were the generous one. I'll take care of it. You can trust me. That last line, oh how wrong she was. The next day, she didn't call. Not once. I knew why. She'd gone to sell it. I could imagine it perfectly, her walking into one of those sleek downtown pawn boutiques, designer purse over her shoulder, pretending she didn't care whether the item was real or not. That's how greed works, it makes people sloppy. I spent the day quietly cleaning the kitchen, humming under my breath. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I wanted her to dig deeper, to see how far she'd go once she thought she'd gotten away with it. By the third day, she finally called. Mom, she said, her voice unusually cheerful. You were right. That old bracelet wasn't worth much, but I still managed to get a few $100 for it. I put the money toward fixing my car. You don't mind, right? I smiled faintly into the phone. Of course not, dear. I'm glad it helped. Oh, and she added, I stopped by yesterday, but you must have been out. I just wanted to say thanks for letting me take it. Any time, I said softly. Sometimes, the things we let go of find their own way back. She laughed, not getting it. Sure, Mom. Talk later. When she hung up, I set the phone down slowly and whispered to the empty room, now let's see how far the news travels. That evening, I turned on the TV. The local news was running a story about an antique collectors' convention happening downtown. I wasn't really paying attention until I heard the anchor say the words. An incredible discovery today, a missing Cartier heirloom believed lost since World War II has been authenticated by experts. My heart jumped. The camera showed a photograph of a bracelet, the bracelet. Mine. Or rather, the one that had once belonged to me before she tried to sell its fake twin. The anchor continued. The piece, valued at approximately $3.2 million, was brought in by a private collector who says it had been in his family for generations. I smiled. So they think it's his, I whispered. Mr. Whitman must have contacted the authorities after verifying the serial marks. They traced its history and discovered the missing record. He hadn't named me publicly, probably to protect me, but the story was out. And my daughter? She was about to have the shock of her life. Sure enough, she called that same night, her voice shrill with disbelief. Mom, did you see the news? That bracelet, they said it was worth millions. I feigned confusion. Bracelet. The one I sold, she said, breathless. Oh my God, Mom, that thing you let me pawn, it must have been the same one. We need to go back and tell them it's ours. We can split the money, right? 50-50. I took a slow sip of my tea. You sold it, remember? You said it was worthless. Mom, don't be ridiculous. You didn't know. We can prove it was ours. You still have the box, don't you? Receipts? Pictures? Anything. I let silence hang for a moment. Then I said softly, do you even remember what you said to me that night? She hesitated. What are you talking about? You said it looked like thrift store junk, I said. You laughed. You took it because you thought you were doing me a favor. And now suddenly you care. Her tone hardened. Mom, don't play games. You need to help me fix this. I smiled faintly. Oh, I already did. What does that mean? You'll see, I said, and ended the call. 2 days later, her name was on the news too. Not in the headline, just mentioned briefly, when reporters began investigating how the heirloom resurfaced. The pawn shop had released surveillance footage to the media, showing a middle-aged woman bringing in what she claimed was a family bracelet. The clip froze on her face for a moment. Perfect lighting. Perfect clarity. Perfect proof of greed. I sat on my couch, the real bracelet glinting in my hand, and felt something like justice stir in my chest. That week, she showed up at my door, eyes red, voice shaking. Mom, you have to help me, she pleaded. People online are saying I tried to sell stolen property. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. You sold what wasn't yours. That's all they see. Tears ran down her cheeks. You don't understand, they're saying the real one's been found. That's impossible, unless... Her eyes darted to my neck. I was wearing the locket that matched the bangle. Realization hit her like a slap. You knew, she whispered. You knew it was real. I didn't deny it. I simply met her gaze and said, and you knew it wasn't yours. She sank onto the porch steps, sobbing. You wanted to humiliate me. I shook my head. No. You did that yourself. I just gave you the rope. Please, she said through tears, just tell them it was a misunderstanding. Maybe it was, I said softly. Maybe it was a lesson. Her husband's car pulled up just then. He stepped out, looking at her with the kind of exhaustion only regret can bring. They called the police, he said quietly. They just want to ask questions. She buried her face in her hands. I turned and went inside, closing the door gently behind me. That night, I took the bracelet out again, placing it beside the locket. The light from the lamp caught every detail, every curve, every memory. My husband's engraving still shimmered faintly inside. I could almost hear his voice. You can't buy class, Maggie. You can only inherit it, or earn it. I whispered, guess who failed both tests? The next morning, I called Mr. Whitman. They found her on the footage, I told him. I saw, he said gently. The media's treating it like a scandal, but the museum wants to feature the real one with your story. They're offering compensation and a permanent plaque in your name. I hesitated. A plaque? Yes, he said. It would read donated by Margaret Ellison, original owner and preserver. I smiled softly. That's worth more than any check. He chuckled. Still, the check won't hurt. I'll have it drawn up by Monday. That evening, I received one last text from her. You ruined me, Mom. I stared at it for a while before replying. No, dear. You did that when you decided my worth ended with your opinion. Then I put my phone down and poured myself another cup of tea. The next morning, the TV played the story again. This time, the headline read, Local widow identified as owner of historic Cartier heirloom, bracelet to be displayed at National Museum. I smiled faintly. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about the truth, shining exactly as bright as it was always meant to. The newspaper came early that morning, slid under my door with a soft rustle. I already knew what it said. Still, I made myself unfold it slowly, breathing in the smell of ink and validation. Local widow identified as owner of $3.2 million Cartier heirloom. My name was printed right beneath the headline, Margaret Ellison, 78, of Albany. There was even a small photo of me leaving Mr. Whitman's shop, holding a velvet case close to my chest. For a moment, I just stared at it, not with pride, but disbelief. How strange it felt to see my quiet life reduced to a few neat paragraphs. They called me a woman of grace and integrity. They called my daughter a misunderstanding. Funny, how words could hide intent. By afternoon, my phone was full of messages, reporters, museum curators, even old neighbors who hadn't called in years. One said, "We always knew you had good taste." Another wrote, "Congratulations. What a beautiful legacy for your family." Legacy. The irony of that word wasn't lost on me. My daughter hadn't reached out since her last text, the angry one. But her husband had. His message was brief. She's staying with her sister for now. She's embarrassed. Please don't speak to the press. Embarrassed? I almost laughed. That evening, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, a woman stood there, mid-30s, sharp suit, calm expression. She flashed her credentials. Mrs. Ellison? I'm with the New York Museum of Fine Arts. May I come in? Her tone was polite, careful. I nodded and stepped aside. She admired my modest living room as though it were an exhibit itself. Beautiful home. I understand you were the last private owner of the Cartier heirloom. I smiled faintly. Apparently so. She sat across from me, opening a sleek folder. We'd like to include not just the bracelet, but its story, your story, in our feature this winter. It would honor the piece's journey, and your husband's memory. My fingers tightened around my teacup. My husband. Yes, she said gently. I read that it originally belonged to him. He purchased it decades ago? I nodded slowly. He said it was an old auction find. I never thought twice about it. Her eyes brightened. Did he ever mention where it came from? No, I said softly. He just said he wanted to give me something no one else in the world had. I paused. Turns out he was right. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt too quiet, too full of echoes. I went into the study and pulled open his old drawer, the one I hadn't touched in years. Inside were yellowed receipts, letters, and a small leather pouch I didn't recognize. When I opened it, a folded note fell out. The handwriting stopped my breath. For Emmy, you'll understand one day. This bracelet belonged to a woman who taught me about sacrifice. If you ever need to start again, let this be your beginning. Thomas. My husband. The next morning, I sat by the window holding that note, watching the sun rise. He'd bought it not for value, but for legacy. And somehow, through all those years, it had turned into both. When my daughter laughed at that jewelry, she wasn't mocking its worth. She was mocking everything her father stood for: hard work, loyalty, humility. The realization hit harder than I expected. And it hurt, because in her laughter, I heard something else. Jealousy. Not of the money, but of what I had with him that she never could replace. 2 days later, the museum sent a car. They wanted photographs and a formal signing of the donation papers. When I arrived, cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted questions. Mrs. Ellison, how does it feel to own a lost masterpiece? Will you be keeping any of the money? Did you know its true value all these years? I smiled calmly. I just knew it was priceless to me. The curator, a kind man in a tailored gray suit, guided me through marble halls to a private room. On a velvet pedestal lay the bracelet, polished, gleaming under soft light. It's stunning, I whispered. He nodded. It's also insured now for $3.2 million. And once it's officially donated, it will bear your name, and your husband's. I hesitated. Mine and his. He smiled. Yes. The Ellison heirloom. Something warm filled my chest. He would have liked that. But outside that same building, someone else watched from her car. Through tinted glass, my daughter sat silently, sunglasses hiding her eyes. When the press surrounded me again, she turned away, knuckles white on the steering wheel. Inside I could feel it, that storm I'd once carried now brewing in her. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. But a small quiet satisfaction bloomed deep within me, justice that didn't need revenge, only patience. That evening, she called. I almost didn't answer. But I did. Mom, she said, her voice softer this time. I saw the news. The bracelet looks beautiful. Thank you, I said. Silence stretched between us. Then she said, they're calling it yours. But it was Dad's gift to you, right? Yes. So technically, she hesitated, it's family property. You know, something we all share. I closed my eyes. There it was again. Not guilt. Not love. Greed, reborn as entitlement. It's being donated to the museum, I said calmly. Her voice cracked. Why? You could have sold it. We could have. No, I interrupted. I could have. You already sold your chance. There was a long pause. Then she whispered, I didn't mean to hurt you. I sighed softly. You didn't hurt me, dear. You only reminded me how much I'd forgotten, about who you've become. She didn't speak after that. Just hung up quietly, leaving the silence heavy as stone. A week later, the museum held a private preview. Mr. Whitman attended, along with curators, collectors, and a handful of local press. The bracelet glowed under its display light, resting beside a small plaque. The Ellison heirloom. Donated by Margaret and Thomas Ellison. Recovered 2025, a symbol of loyalty, love, and truth rediscovered. I stood there in front of it, surrounded by strangers murmuring admiration. And yet, somehow, I felt closer to my husband than I had in years. A journalist approached. Mrs. Ellison, what would you say this story means to you? I smiled faintly. That some treasures don't reveal their worth until someone tries to throw them away. Later that evening, as I left the museum, I noticed a familiar figure waiting by the fountain outside. Her. She looked smaller somehow, her makeup streaked, her expression hollow. She stepped forward, clutching a newspaper. You didn't even tell me, she said quietly. I didn't think you'd care. She exhaled sharply. You think I only care about money. I looked at her sadly. You told me that yourself. Tears filled her eyes. I just wanted to feel like I mattered to you. You always talked about Dad, his things, his memories, never mine. I froze. Because for the first time, her voice didn't sound cruel, it sounded wounded. You mattered, I said softly. You always did. But somewhere along the way, you started measuring love in price tags. She wiped her eyes. And now everyone thinks I'm a thief. I stepped closer. Then stop being one. Start over. Make something of your own. She turned away, staring at the glowing museum windows. You make it sound easy. It isn't, I said. But it's worth more than $3.2 million. She laughed bitterly. That's what you think everything's worth now, isn't it? I shook my head. No, dear. That's what you lost trying to prove you were richer than me. Her shoulders stiffened. She looked like she might say something, but didn't. Instead, she walked toward her car and drove away. Inside my purse, my phone buzzed, a message from the museum director. Mrs. Ellison, there's something you should know. The engraving inside the bracelet, there's a second name. We didn't notice it before. I frowned. It's inscribed for Emmy and L.A., until the stars lose their shine. Do you know who L.A. might be? My breath caught. I knew. L.A., Lydia Anderson. My husband's first fiancée. The one he told me about decades ago, a wartime nurse who died young. He'd bought the bracelet years after her death. He never told me it once belonged to her. He'd kept it. Given it to me. And somehow I wasn't angry, only deeply, strangely at peace. Because I understood what he'd meant in his letter: if you ever need to start again, let this be your beginning. He'd left the past behind, and now I finally could too. That night, I sat by the window, the moonlight falling across my desk. I unfolded his letter one more time, smoothing the fragile paper with care. I forgive you, I whispered. For her, for everything. You gave me more than you owed. You gave me the chance to see truth, even when it hurt. And for the first time since the laughter and betrayal, my heart felt light again. The museum gala was everything my daughter had always loved: velvet ropes, flashing cameras, and polished people pretending to care about art. They'd invited me as the guest of honor. The woman who rescued history. Funny, I thought, how the same crowd who once ignored me now leaned in for photographs. I wore my pale blue coat and a gold brooch that had belonged to my mother. No diamonds, no flash, just quiet elegance. The kind that doesn't beg for attention, it earns it. The Ellison heirloom sat behind a glass display under perfect light. The placard beneath it read, "Donated by Margaret and Thomas Ellison." For a brief moment, I wished my husband could see it. Then again, maybe he could. Reporters surrounded me with microphones. "Mrs. Ellison, how does it feel knowing something so valuable was in your home all these years?" I smiled. It was always valuable to me, just not for the reasons people think. One of them laughed. "You must feel vindicated after everything that's happened." I looked into the camera, my voice steady. "I don't believe in revenge. I believe in education." The reporter tilted her head. "Education." I nodded. "Some lessons take a lifetime to deliver. And some, a very expensive bracelet." They chuckled politely, jotting it down like it was a quote fit for their headlines. Then I saw her. My daughter. She stood by the far column, half hidden behind a group of donors. Her hair was perfect, her lipstick new, but her eyes, they told another story. When she caught me looking, she froze. Then she walked forward, slow but sure, like she had rehearsed every step. People turned as she approached, whispers rising like static. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Can we talk?" I took a slow sip of my champagne. "Of course. Publicly or privately?" Her jaw clenched. "Don't do this." "Do what?" I asked softly. "Answer your questions honestly." "Mom," she hissed under her breath, "I came to apologize." For a moment, I let her stand there, words caught in her throat, camera lights glancing off her trembling hands. Finally, I said quietly, "Then say it." She swallowed hard. "I'm sorry. For selling the bracelet. For not listening. For embarrassing you." The sincerity in her voice cracked through the noise. A few people nearby stopped whispering. I nodded slowly. Apology accepted. Her shoulders dropped in relief. "Thank you." "But forgiveness," I added, "doesn't erase consequences." She blinked. "What?" I turned slightly so my words carried to the crowd. "It's funny, isn't it? When people mock your treasures, then come crawling back once the world calls them priceless." The nearby guests shifted uncomfortably. My daughter's cheeks flushed red. "You don't have to humiliate me." "I don't," I said gently. "You've already done that on your own." A journalist stepped closer, eyes wide with curiosity. "Is this your daughter, Mrs. Ellison?" She froze. I saw panic flicker in her eyes, fear of headlines, of being labeled the one who sold the heirloom. "Yes," I said, turning toward the reporter, my voice calm. "This is my daughter, the one who taught me the difference between price and value. Gasps rippled through the small circle around us. Her lips parted, stunned. "Mom," she whispered. I leaned in, voice low enough only she could hear. "I didn't say that to hurt you. I said it to remind you that the world sees what we choose to show it. You chose greed. Choose better next time." She turned away, tears brimming, and walked quickly toward the exit. Cameras followed her, but I didn't stop them. Some truths need witnesses. When she disappeared into the hallway, the crowd slowly resumed their conversations. Music swelled again, the polite hum of violins and champagne chatter. But I couldn't shake the ache in my chest. I hadn't wanted vengeance. Just acknowledgement. And somehow, it felt hollow. Later that evening, after the applause and speeches, I slipped away to the quiet exhibit room where the bracelet rested. The lights dimmed automatically as I approached, leaving the display glowing softly in the dark. I stood there, watching my reflection shimmer faintly on the glass. "You'd think this was a fairy tale ending, wouldn't you?" I whispered. "Justice served, truth revealed." I smiled sadly. But real endings are quieter than applause. I traced a finger across the glass, stopping near the engraved initials, Emmy and L.A. For a long moment, I thought about that, about how love and legacy intertwine, how both can be misunderstood by those who never had to earn them. The curator entered quietly behind me. "You handled tonight beautifully," he said. "I didn't handle anything," I replied softly. "I just stopped letting other people hold the pen." He smiled. "That's a good way to put it." We stood there in silence for a moment before he said, "You know, the museum has had more visitors this week than any month before. People are inspired by your story." "Inspired?" I repeated. "By what?" He smiled gently. "By the fact that you didn't sell your past for profit. That you protected it." I nodded, feeling a strange warmth bloom inside me. "Then maybe that's worth more than the bracelet." He smiled again. "Exactly." On my way out, I saw her again, sitting on a marble bench near the exit, shoulders hunched, makeup smudged. "Still here?" I asked quietly. She looked up, eyes tired. "I didn't want to leave like that." I sighed. "Then why did you?" "Because you made me feel small," she whispered. I sat beside her. "You've always been tall, darling. But you confuse height with growth." Her voice cracked. "I made one mistake." I looked at her gently. "No. You made a choice. Mistakes are accidents. Choices show character." She stared at the floor. "Everyone hates me now." "They don't hate you," I said softly. "They just finally see you. It's up to you what they see next." She looked up at me, tears streaking her cheeks. "What do you see, Mom?" For the first time in years, I didn't see the arrogant young woman who mocked me. I saw the scared little girl who used to twirl in my old necklaces and ask if she looked like a princess. "I see my daughter," I said quietly. "And I see the woman she still has time to become." Her chin trembled. "You still believe that?" "I have to," I said, standing slowly. "Otherwise this whole story is just about greed. And I'd rather it be about grace." The next morning, the newspaper headline read, "Margaret Ellison steals hearts at museum gala." They called my speech a masterclass in dignity. But tucked beneath the main article was a smaller one. "Daughter of widow issues public apology. I forgot what really matters." The photo showed her standing outside her small art studio, one she'd just reopened, painting again for the first time in years. I didn't smile right away. I just sat quietly at my table, tea steaming beside me, letting the words sink in. Maybe humiliation had planted something humility could finally grow from. That afternoon, the museum sent me a personal letter thanking me again for my donation. At the bottom, the curator had handwritten one line. "P.S. We've decided to add your daughter's name to the exhibit title. We think it tells the full story." I blinked at the paper, unsure whether to laugh or cry. That evening, I returned to the museum after closing. The curator met me at the door, smiling warmly. "Thought you might want to see the new plaque." He led me through the empty halls to the display. Under the soft light, the sign now read, "The Ellison Legacy. Donated by Margaret Ellison and family. A reminder that true worth is not found in gold, but in growth. I stood there silently, emotion thick in my throat. He turned to me. We hope that's all right. It's perfect, I whispered. That's what he would have wanted. As I walked back toward the exit, I stopped for one last glance at the bracelet. Its gold surface shimmered softly, like starlight trapped in glass. And for the first time, I felt peace. Not the kind that comes after victory, the kind that comes after understanding. It's strange, the kind of silence that follows truth. It doesn't echo. It just rests. After the gala, the noise faded, the reporters stopped calling, the museum settled into its quiet rhythm. And I found myself, once again, in the small suburban home where everything began. The only difference was how light it felt now. No more guilt in the corners. No more resentment in the walls. Just peace. On my kitchen table sat a framed photograph from the exhibit, the bracelet gleaming beneath its plaque, my husband's name beside mine. And for the first time, my daughter's name too. I'd stared at it for days before realizing what made it so powerful. It wasn't about credit. It was about closure. That Sunday morning, I heard a familiar knock. Not the confident, sharp kind, but the hesitant one of someone who isn't sure if they're welcome. I opened the door. She stood there, holding a small brown paper bag and looking nothing like the woman who once mocked me across my own dinner table. Her hair was tied back in a simple bun. No makeup. No arrogance. Just tired, honest eyes. "Hi, Mom," she said softly. "Good morning, sweetheart. Can I come in?" I stepped aside. Of course. We sat at the same table where our last argument had happened, the one about the jewelry, the coat, the money. The air between us was different now. Thinner. Kinder. She placed the paper bag on the table and opened it slowly. Inside were two small objects wrapped in tissue, a tube of paint and a delicate hand-painted pendant. "I made this," she said, her voice trembling. "It's glass. I painted the inside with gold flecks. I've been selling them online." I lifted it gently, admiring the soft shimmer. "It's beautiful." She smiled weakly. I called it the lesson. Every piece I sell, I donate part of it to a charity that helps elderly women keep their homes. "I thought you'd like that." My throat tightened. "I do." She blinked fast, fighting tears. "I didn't come to talk about money or make excuses. I came to say I'm sorry, for real this time." She looked up, eyes glistening. "When Dad died, I felt like you stopped seeing me. Everything was about him, his memories, his things, his stories. I was jealous. And I thought, if I could prove I understood value, you'd finally respect me." I reached across the table, resting my hand over hers. "Oh darling. I never stopped seeing you. I just couldn't reach you through the noise." Her lip quivered. "I became everything I said I wouldn't." I nodded gently. "That's how we learn who we really are." For a while, we just sat there, hands together, sunlight pouring across the kitchen tiles. She looked around, smiling faintly. "It's funny. I used to think this house was so old-fashioned. Now it feels like home again." "Maybe it always was," I said softly. "You just stopped visiting it with your heart." She let out a shaky laugh. "You and your quotes." I smiled. "Your father liked them." Her eyes softened. "He would have been proud of you." I tilted my head. "And of you, once you remember what he taught us both, that worth isn't measured in gold but in grace." A few weeks later, the museum invited us both back for a televised interview. They wanted the full family story. I hesitated at first. I'd already had my closure. But when I looked at her, calm, humble, quietly rebuilding herself, I said yes. The morning of the recording, she picked me up. Her car wasn't new anymore, a little worn around the edges, but reliable. As we drove, she said, "I'm nervous." I chuckled. "You? You used to speak like you owned the world." "That was before I realized the world can take everything back," she said, smiling sadly. "Not everything," I replied. "Only what wasn't truly yours." Inside the museum, lights and cameras were everywhere. The interviewer, a warm middle-aged man with a calm voice, greeted us both. "Mrs. Ellison, Thank you for joining us again. And this must be your daughter, the woman who helped bring the story full circle." She blushed, murmuring a quiet thank you. They asked questions about the heirloom, the past, the lesson learned. I answered truthfully but briefly. This wasn't my spotlight anymore, it was hers to step into the light she'd once avoided. When they asked her what she'd learned, she hesitated, then said, "I learned that greed can make you blind, but love, even tough love, can make you see again. My mother didn't punish me. She taught me. And I'll spend the rest of my life being worthy of that." The interviewer smiled. Beautifully said. And for the first time, I saw something I hadn't in years, the little girl I used to read bedtime stories to. After the cameras packed up and the lights dimmed, she turned to me. "Do you think people can really change?" I nodded. "If they choose to." She smiled faintly. "Then I'll keep choosing." I reached up, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "That's all any of us can do." Weeks passed. The interview aired nationwide. People sent letters, cards, even small gifts. Some wrote about their own betrayals, others about forgiveness they hadn't thought possible until they heard our story. One letter stood out. It was from a woman in Ohio who wrote, "Your story made me call my mother after 12 years. Thank you for reminding me that no matter how old we get, we still have time to make things right." I read it 3 times, then folded it neatly and tucked it into my jewelry box, right where the fake bracelet used to lie. The irony wasn't lost on me. Once, that box held greed. Now, it held grace. One afternoon, I walked through the museum again, alone this time. The Ellison Legacy display gleamed under warm light. Visitors lingered, whispering admiration. As I stood there, a young woman nearby turned to her friend and said, "Imagine throwing that away, she must have been crazy." I smiled softly and whispered under my breath, "No, just lost." I stepped closer to the glass and studied the bracelet, the gold, the engraving, the subtle curve where time had softened it. It no longer felt like an object of wealth. It felt like a mirror, one that had reflected everything I needed to see about my life, my daughter and myself. I touched the glass gently and whispered, "Thank you, Thomas, for loving me enough to teach me what love costs." Outside, as I walked to the parking lot, I saw her waiting by her car, waving. "Need a ride, Mom?" I grinned. "Always." She opened the door for me, helping me in with that same quiet patience I used to show her as a child. As we drove, the radio played softly, some old Sinatra tune her father loved. She hummed along, off-key but happy. For a moment, I closed my eyes and imagined him sitting there beside us, smiling the way he used to. And I realized, revenge had nothing to do with punishment. It was about peace. About walking away knowing you didn't let the darkness change you. Weeks later, the museum sent me a final update. The bracelet had been officially added to their Legacy of Love collection. The note attached read, "For generations to come, may this remind people that every story of greed can become a story of grace." I framed that note beside my husband's letter. Different handwriting. Same message. Now when people ask me about the $3.2 million bracelet, I tell them this: it was never about the gold. It was about what the gold revealed. The daughter I thought I'd lost. The man I still loved. And the woman I finally became. That night, as I locked up and headed to bed, I paused by the mirror one last time. My reflection smiled back, wrinkles, gray hair, all of it. But behind my own eyes, I saw something new, pride without bitterness. I whispered, "Some treasures you wear. Some you lose. And some, you live to understand." Then I turned off the light. "Before you go, if life gave you the chance to turn betrayal into a lesson, would you take it, or let the anger win? Tell me in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of truth, grace, and quiet revenge.